another episode of RRX Podcast. My name is Frank, and can I get my co-hosts to introduce themselves?
Hey y'all, this is Matt.
Right.
This is Annie January.
All right. So we got Annie January that's coming in this week to contribute to the conversation when it comes down to the topic at hand, and we are grateful for her to join us so we can have this conversation be as plentiful and substance filled as possible. Okay. So for this week, what we're going to do is we are going to do a part two. We're going to do a part two of ways single mothers destroy their sons. Ways single mothers destroy their sons. In the last part, we actually, myself and Nat, left off on the detail of coddling their sons, and now we're going to go ahead and continue on with the article, which, just to let you know, the article is going to be in the description when it comes down to the video. So you go ahead and be able to click on the actual link to the article so you can actually read what we are actually going over, so on and so forth. But we're going to go ahead and continue on, and now we're going to go and delve into the example of inconsistent discipline. Inconsistent discipline. Now, for this episode, we're going to really go and bounce details off of, you know, what we think is true, what we think is not true, just giving our opinions, giving facts, giving details, what may have you. We're just going to go ahead and do a free for all, okay? So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and read the next example that's up to bat as far as this article, and we'll just go in. So, inconsistent discipline. Along with coddling, the most damaging thing single mothers do to kids is inconsistently disciplining them because they don't understand the role a father plays in establishing consistent structure and order in a child's life. They either don't punish boys for their bad behavior or they go overboard with excessively violent or harsh punishments. With an emotional mother, there is no plan of action to correct the bad behavior in their sons or to educate them on what they are doing is wrong. So the bad behavior often continues well into their adulthood, and because boys never learn that for every action there will be the same reaction every time, they never grow up to learn how to take responsibility for their actions. Okay. So for this example, let me go ahead and first give my take on it. Now, when it comes down to this example, for me, the piece that really sticks out to me is the detail in which it says uh, they don't punish, or they either don't punish boys for their bad behavior or they go overboard with excessively violent or harsh punishments. Um, and what I will say is this. So there's this back and forth of, well, women are more emotional and then men are more logical. Where one of the things I always say is, it doesn't matter necessarily if you're more emotional or if you're more logical. You could be more logical in your own bullshit, but you could also be extremely emotional within your own bullshit. Okay? Where the piece in which you have most saying, or to believe that most women are more on the emotional side and they more tied to their emotions and being able to understand their emotions better, I think is fairly true. Um, where said emotion, depending on what the son is doing that may be bad behavior, what may have you, either can go one or two ways. Either it can go one way as far as not punishing, the boy for behavior that inevitably later on down the line, if no correction is made, that behavior could be in the sights of, let's just say, a police officer. And that police officer is looking at this grown man, or I would even go as far as saying, because obviously the world that we live in today, look at this child or young man and be like, I'm a police officer and I'm gonna do what I need to do to correct the deficiency, which hopefully in most cases, the correction doesn't end up losing anybody's lives in that situation. You know, where I think it's a special place in black people's lives in reference to our children, our boys, our young men, where we're going to be looked at differently. We're going to be looked at as more aggressive based on, the amount of propaganda, that is out there when it comes down to black people, let alone when it comes down to black men, black males, or young black men. And so being able to mitigate what this son, what this young man, what this boy may end up doing when it comes down to their behavior, mitigate reactions from others that could potentially have that son lose his life in a situation where all of a sudden the son may not understand contextually. I don't have the privilege enough to be in this situation acting up and being either overly emotional or acting up in a certain way that is not conducive for the environment that I am in. And now I have to be checked by a police officer or someone of authority. Okay. And then as far as the excessively violent or harsh punishments piece, um, there is a way to punish children. There is a way to discipline children. There are ways. However, oftentimes it's not really talked about within the black community on the various ways to do it that doesn't create a burned memory of trauma that that child is now going to continually self-identify with and believe is the normal, and then to the point where this behavior is normalized as far as more so blurring the lines between discipline and punishment on one side and blatant abuse on the other. So that's my take on this particular example. What y'all think?
That was the most
Um,
very logical take on that.
Thank you, thank
But
you.
I'm going
I'm a
to
logical
come
guy.
from I'm going to come from an emotional standpoint because we are very emotional.
Okay.
But I think Black women have to walk in a realm of traumatic spaces because of the society that we live in.
Okay. Okay.
So if we are not intentional about where we're going with our emotions, it does cause chaos and disruption with any family dynamics.
Mm.
I think having a 14-year-old son and having to be a single parent, not by choice, by circumstances. And I think a
Mm.
lot of people in the Black community, we often forget that there are circumstances that are not upon our control that makes us single parents. So we can't generalize the statement that that child will be inconsistent of any, will be lacking any value within the society if they don't have a father in the home.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think we are the only people that don't look at sickness, we don't look at death,
Mm.
we don't look at absences from a father for those standpoint. We just automatically assume they're absent because they don't want to be there or they can't be there or there's some type of barrier that's preventing a father from being there. I think
Why do you think?
empathy.
Let me ask. I don't mean to cut you off, but let me ask a question. Why do you think um, the trope of the absentee father or absentee black father is more so at the forefront when it comes down to all of the negatives that can be thought of compared to all of the random circumstances that should be in the conversation? Why do you think that is more so at the forefront?
I think it stems from white male perspective of everything.
Okay.
The white male perspective, and this is in America, is generally how everything is measured.
Mm,
We're measuring things based off of what a white male has and doesn't have. When we are
mm,
not, that is not our bicycle to ride.
mm.
And I
Well,
think
I like the
once we
analogy. Go ahead. Go ahead.
once we stop measuring ourselves to what they do, like our ancestors and elders did, once we stop measuring ourselves, then we can get back in a rhythm that our elders used to be in. We didn't really look too much at what they were doing. We had our own thing, but when we had our own things, that caused another issue. But I think the inconsistent back to the point of inconsistent discipline.
Okay.
Circumstances creates inconsistency. When has at any point in time have we been in this country where we've been consistent with and we've had any consistency? We've had to raise our children with inconsistencies since we've been here. Our discipline has never been consistent. And I think not only that, we've had to raise other people's children at the same time. So I think we have a different perspective that we have to learn to not measure ourselves with other people. We are very much different from not even just Black Americans, but we're Black Americans. We're very different from Caribbeans. We're very different from Africans. We're very different because we have so many other inconsistencies that we have to pivot and change our discipline based on our circumstances.
Hmm. Okay. I Here are the thoughts that pop in my mind when it comes down to what you just said, AJ. Uh, so, um, I definitely agree with you when it comes down to the lens that we, or the apex of what we continue to look at as far as what we measure everything else on. I definitely agree with that. In addition to, the various ways that we are always bringing in, you know the negatives, of how we see one another, because I think it's in baseline in general, based on, propaganda, based on media, it's just a part of pop culture, even though I would like for it not to be, you know but I'm one individual man in this world, one individual black man, one individual man when it comes down to a higher level of melanin. You know, I can't stand when we continue to do the back and forth of negative tropes that we place on one another, as far as black men doing it to black women and black women doing it to black men. But what I do agree with is us being able to come together to have a conversation about why these tropes exist, in addition to filtering out what more so are the generalizations compared to what we need to see as far as the data that proves certain traumatic things are happening at all levels, no matter the gender. You know what I mean? Like, like I don't I don't agree with, and I'm gonna just put it baseline level, and I'll put this perspective out there. I don't agree with, and I never will agree with, the single parented home. You know, I don't agree with it, but that's just my take. Doesn't necessarily mean that in all single parented homes there are certain things that will happen that will automatically put a child at a certain disadvantage. But what it does mean is, because of the data that we have seen over time, there is a larger percentage that children may be at a disadvantage. And I'm one of the ones in my mind, like, to give an example, I talk, to my wife all the time about this. I talk to my wife all the time about this. I tell her, like, we babies, you know what I'm saying? We are going to be in the same home, you know? We're going to be in the same home. We're going to have, that close knit family where both parents are there, you know? And this, it, and me having this mindset is not excluding the other details in which, let's just say, you have a couple there together, they end up having kids, and then one of the parents, ends up passing away for whatever reason, or one of the parents ends up getting sick, and ends up passing away, or other factors in which you legitimately have a parent that was not ready to be one, or did not do their proper study prior to a child coming into this world.
I'm glad that you made that point of a parent not being ready. When you look
Mm,
at the statistics of Black single mothers, if you ever ask a Black single mother how old they were when they had that child and how many years apart was the child's father, and you will get a surprisingly a lot of them are under, at least under 20. We have a lot of
okay,
children making parental decisions. A lot of children are having to make parental decisions, and and I think that's one thing that you made, that point that you made about parents that are not ready. There are a lot of children that are not are being born to parents that are not ready, and that's something that we need to have a conversation about, the age dynamics of people that are having children. I think some people have this notion that all homes with single parents, just because the father's not physically in the home, does not mean that any parenting is not happening. It's happening because I've seen it from an educational standpoint. I've seen the fathers come in, be present, ask what their child is doing, but they don't live in the same home. So the inconsistent discipline, I think, happens when parents are not able to acknowledge their emotions or acknowledge their trauma, acknowledge their past, acknowledge things to make sure that the parental guidance is there on a positive standpoint. I think the negative standpoint on what we're talking about with the inconsistent discipline happens when that parent is not ready and they continue to parent, they continue to try to do things the way that their parents did it or their grandparents or where somebody else has done it, when it doesn't work that well because they were not ready.
okay. I I believe I believe that there can be a central start point of you knowing you are ready. However, it's ready enough to make that step, not necessarily ready for every scenario that comes with parenting. Like, to give an example, I want to have kids one day. This is probably one of the reasons why I've waited the longest when it comes down to actually having children, because it was more so me not necessarily wanting to have children, but wanting to be the best parent I can be. And there's a difference. There's a fundamental difference between, oh, I just want to have some babies, compared to, I know I want to become a parent. That's why I ain't got no kids yet.
Be patient. Be patient.
You know what I'm saying? I get it. Patience is definitely there. Okay? It is. However, I know that if me and my wife want to create that start point, I know I am ready enough for whatever scenario that comes our way. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
and I think waiting, having young people understand the emotional toll and being honest with your child about how hard parenting is what a lot of parents, a lot of elders did not do.
facts.
There was no honesty about how hard it is. I'm very honest with my children. You do not want this parenting life too early. Here's what's come with it. Here's how this works. And I
Well,
think that conversation really does not happen in certain households.
okay, let me, well, you know what? I'm gonna just say this real
I
quick,
think it
but
does
then
happen. I just don't. Okay, go ahead.
go ahead,
Go ahead,
Nat.
Nat.
What you guys say? Nat.
Sorry, y'all, I've been out of touch because the dog. has been needing attention.
We know you taking care
Okay,
of Lola.
I'm a
We
single
know you
parent
taking care of Lola.
of a dog, and listen, fur mommies are parents too. I just want to say
Yes,
that.
you are. Yes,
Pops.
yes, you are.
All right, but
So I was taking notes, and before y'all get too deep into it, let me just give my quick little spiel of what I think
okay,
so far. I agree with some of what the both of y'all said, right? For one, I think that I'm sorry, any January, I'm gonna call you AJ. I'm gonna forget any
it's
January.
all. It's now trending. It's
Okay.
now trending.
Right?
Absolutely, AJ. All right, cool.
I heard something about a disadvantage, and I don't remember exactly what was said about it, but I think that whether the child is born into a two-parent household, I'm sorry, if for kids who are born or who are raised into a one-parent household, I believe that they're already at a disadvantage. Just like I think that if you are the only child in a household, I think that that's also a disadvantage. Why? Because you're the only child, right? Whether you're a
Lot.
one parent, two parent household, how, I mean, until you get a chance to actually be enrolled in school and you get around other kids, or unless you have a big family where you see like cousins and, kids in your neighborhood on a consistent basis, there's a large chance that you may lack socialization skills with other kids, which is that puts you at a disadvantage. So, and and if you're the only kid, so sorry, if you're a child or two kids raised in a one parent household, you're at a disadvantage because it's only one parent there, right? So let's just say that you're one kid and you have one parent there. You may be okay because you can have time, like there is time there for one-on-one interaction. But if you got two or three other kids there and you got one parent, it is only but so much time that that one parent can dedicate to each one of y'all individually. There's too much to be done. That's a disadvantage. I mean, that's how I see it. Like I grew up in a big family, and so it was very hard for my mother and my father to give all of us equal attention. We got attention, but it wouldn't have been easy to give like one child that much attention.
Okay.
Kind of like a classroom, right? Like you have to how can you focus on what makes teachers so I can't find the word, but it's like it's something special that they have. Like what strategies do they use to focus on the entire class? I mean, they're in a classroom with like 20, 30
Absolutely.
kids. It's like,
Let me let me
how do what kids need you see what I'm
when
saying?
it comes down to
So,
teachers, I mean there are various teaching methods that a teacher must understand how to use properly based on I like to call it target population description. You know, depending on what kids you have, when it comes down to the particular ages, when it comes down to how much energy they have, when it comes down to the various backgrounds that are now being brought together, depending on if the school is very multicultural, or depending on if the school is more so baseline one particular culture based on baseline one particular race within that school being the majority. There are multiple factors that go into you know a class. You as a teacher understanding your class and being able to keep their attention consistently. But then if we're going to use that in the scope of children, I definitely agree where parenting techniques, parenting tactics, I'm going to put it like that, parenting tactics, parents also need to understand great study in using various tactics and techniques to raise your children the best way you know how.
And that is also coming from what I said earlier about acknowledging when something is not working. And we,
Mm.
the elders, do not like to acknowledge when something is not working. And I think I had to go back and reach back to the elders and say, beady, 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 beating your kids is not always the answer for discipline.
let me. I'm
And
gonna say.
that's something I would actually say in the
Oh.
black community. I hate to say this, but it's become like it's almost as that's consistent. That is consistent in beating your child's ass to the fact
Listen, well,
of course, that's the
Hey.
most consistent
Nat,
shit. You know what I mean? That's
when you talk about
consistent.
discipline, Frank, earlier you said discipline, discipline and correction. Why do we need correction? Where does that word correction come from?
Okay, let me.
That comes from the standard of society rules in place that we
Let me.
have to follow in the pattern. So the consistency of beating your child's ass has always been there because of where?
I'm a.
Where did
I'm
it
a.
come
I'm a.
from?
Look. Thank you for the layup, and I'm about to dunk it in. Okay. Thank you for the layup. So I think it in two different perspectives. Okay. Uh, one perspective is the aspect of correction being directly tied back to the history of slavery. Okay, that's one aspect of it, and then the aspect of correction in reference to parents in the past, our elders in the past, legitimately only being in the mindset of survival and not understanding all of the mental issues that came with our ancestors going through traumatic things that was essentially passed down to the passed down to the passed down from generation to generation, and those things being normalized out of the inception of slavery. Okay. Now, also another thing I want to talk about, um, and this is my take. This is my take. Uh, a good old fashioned ass whooping is a extreme last resort to me.
Thank you.
A good old fashioned ass whooping is an extreme last resort. My whole thing is, if you can't even have a conversation with your own child, I would even go as far as saying this: is the look you giving your child when they are acting out, that look of them knowing when they look at you, oh, an ass whooping is coming? Or is that look a look of knowing there was a conversation that you and your child had in reference to behavior that they're exuding right now that they know is unacceptable, and with them looking at you, they remember that conversation and now want to correct themselves?
I
No,
think
because you know
it's
why? Because here's what
having
I see.
oh,
I see verbal discipline versus contact discipline require two different tactics, right? So, and how I see it is that in white America, in white households, they actually believe in verbal discipline. Not only do they practice it, but they give their kids a chance to actually speak and give them reason why they're doing what they're doing and give them voice. Where in most black households, most black mamas ain't trying to hear that, right? If they tell you go take out the trash, they don't want to hear why you can't take out the trash. They don't want to hear that. They expect you to put action into it as soon as I say it needs to be instant, right? And it needs to be done. Why? Because I said so. That's the attitude that a lot of black families have. So it doesn't give that child any say so, any type of any opportunity to say, I can't right now because I'm doing homework. Or I can't right now because you asked me to do something earlier that maybe you forgot, mom, but I'm trying to get that done. So then you see what I'm saying? I was
it,
visiting a friend and she was telling her daughter to do something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Her daughter's this little girl is like, I think 8 years old, right? Black. She was like, Mom. She said, Mom, I can't. Mom, listen. Now, me growing up in the house that I grew up in, I never was able to tell my mother, look, you listen to me.
Yeah, that
But
wouldn't
what
happen.
I liked about it is that they
ma'am,
were having a conversation. It wasn't so much of do it right now because I told you to do it. Her mother, which is one of my best friends, actually listened to what she was saying. She said, Mom, listen. I'm trying to do this first. And if I do what you said do, I can't focus on what you told me to do. You see what I'm saying? I said, okay, I get it. I guess okay. But these conversations are just not being had when they're trying to, discipline.
Okay.
Usually in black households.
Look,
So,
You know
AJ,
what I
what you got?
mean?
What you got, AJ?
I got this is the something I've learned through therapy and parenting
Hmm.
and reparenting myself.
Ah, okay.
We have to allow children to do that. And you, because we become that type of parenting makes you become an adult that does not know how to set boundaries. Because when someone in authority comes to you and say, "Hey, I need you to do this," your instinct is like, "Okay, I can't really say I can't do this because such and such and such." You've become psychologically conditioned to obey to that request because an authoritative figure just told you to do something and you're
Yes.
not supposed to challenge that. But
Right.
I had to reparent myself and figure that I can't do that because I'm currently working on another project. Can you come back to me? Maybe I can work it out when I finish this deadline. I think that we teach children not to respect their own boundaries or put boundaries in place. Like you said, she was doing homework. And what's more important, taking the trash out immediately when you say it, or getting that homework and getting that grade that you want them to get? So I think we are not really teaching them boundaries or that they are what they feel emotionally is important or what they need is important.
Okay. Can I say something on that note? Um, has anybody ever thought about the aspect of planning things more in a more even structure to where a situation like that doesn't necessarily happen more often than not. Like to give an example, um, when it comes down to structure, right? So most cases, being able to have a conversation with your child on the times which the dump truck, I'm saying, or the trash truck comes, during the course of the week. More than likely, most cases, it's one time, and being able to find out what that one time is. But then also setting a plan out throughout the course of the week in which the child is consistently taking the trash out, and that plan has already been set. So if child deviates from that plan, now a conversation needs to be had.
And I think that's the difference between building a consistent structure within a child's life versus inconsistent discipline. There's not a constant need for correction, but there correction with discipline. There's a need for consistent structure.
Mm.
And that's two different things that we don't understand in the like structure, building structure is different from having consistent discipline. You don't have to consistently beat a child's ass for them to understand that they need
Facts.
to.
You don't.
Whip
You
you like a
don't.
mama.
But then
You don't.
also being able to reinforce an environment where value is more so placed on critical thinking enough to understand the why behind certain actions. To give an example, why you actually need to take the trash out on these times or these moments during the course of the week. Because we don't want to have no Roscoe's and Mickeys, come up in the household, trying to
Established residency.
it's that, yeah, yeah. You see what I'm saying? See what I'm saying?
Because I got to make some residents right now.
But I think I see the article's point of having two parents be able to establish that consistency, but we can't not acknowledge the single parent households who don't have that because it's just them. It is just them.
It's not just them, it's what they have been conditioned to be taught that is just them through a system that is more hyper individualistic or I would even go as far as saying, big word alert, solipsistic, you know? Like, I don't know if y'all, you know what, let me go ahead, bring up this definition. So, solipsism, right? Um, so, solipsism And I'm gonna read this definition for you. Okay, solipsism is the philosophical idea that only one's mind is sure to exist. As an epistemological position, solipsism holds that knowledge of anything outside one's mind is unsure. The external world and other minds cannot be known and might not exist outside the mind. You completely, if you're very solipsistic, you completely believe anything in your mind is the only thing you should know, and anything outside the mind is what you don't really need to give a fuck about.
And I think epigenetics, black people have been conditioned to be that way.
You talking my language. God, good. Look,
Black people have been conditioned to
say it
be
again.
that way.
Say that word again.
Because
Say
of epigenetics, black
epigenetics.
people have been conditioned
A
to
lot of
be
people
that way.
a lot of people don't know what epigenetics are. Obviously people know what genetics are, right? Like genetically we could see that, when it comes down the pipeline, there's someone in my family that, got kind of a nose like mine, eyes like mine, what I'm saying, ears like mine, so on and so forth. But epigenetics, when it comes down to um freaking, you got uh one of granddaddy's uncles that was an alcoholic, you know, next generation skips when it comes down to maybe, one of his kids not necessarily being an alcoholic, but skip another generation and potentially, as far as seeing certain things or being conditioned by certain things, you have another family member that ends up becoming an alcoholic.
So that goes into this next topic about that article being too emotional.
Okay.
Yeah, it does. It does. It leads
That
to
means
yeah.
right into this next part of the article, being too emotional.
Okay. Someone want to take you want anybody want to read? Go ahead. Just read
I'll
through it.
read it. It's fine.
All right.
Teaching boys to be emotional. Boys who grew up in single parent homes don't learn how to control their emotions. This leads to them not being able to cope with conflict in life. A boy has to grow up to learn discipline and self control in order to navigate life in the real world. When he's raised to think logically by his father, he learns the self control that allows him to walk away from trouble. He thinks about the long term ramifications of his actions and the impact on others. But when he's raised by a woman, he learns to think of his short term feelings. And when he acts on those feelings, he often says and does things he regrets. A man who has no control over his emotions is more prone to get into a rage where he beats a woman who disagrees with him or says no to him, get into fights with men over silly things like a basketball game or a lock, sorry, or a look in his direction, or his words and actions can cause him to get into a scuffle with police where he's fatally shot and killed for resisting arrest. This loss of self control can cause him to be seen as weak by other men and make him a target for the abuses of both predatory men and women.
Mm, okay.
That's pretty steep.
Nat, you want to give your take on it, or AJ, you
I
want to
mean,
give
I
your take?
think because women are, you know, arguably more emotional than men are. If you have a boy growing up in a single mother household, by default, it is he's probably going to be emotional. You see what I'm saying? He's feeding off of her. He's around her 24/7. He's being raised by her. So if she is emotional, and if she is um, displaying that, if that's what he sees, eventually that's what he starts to feel, and then he'll display actions of it. But I think that, and I think we see it sometimes. Frank and I have friends, I've known AJ for a while too, and I think that all of us have seen guys. Sometimes you can see, sometimes you can kind of see the ones where you like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you was raised by women, right? I
Say,
mean,
listen, I can see
sometimes you
it.
can just smell it coming before they even start talking. But I think that this kind of pinpoints a lot of things. Um, I think that when it mentions, um, when it says he thinks about the long term ramifications of his actions and the impact on others, that reminds me of me a little bit. Like I don't, and I know this article is very, wow. I would hope it's general, where it's not, specifically talking about, all single, mothers, who raise boys are destroying their
The
sons.
comments don't
But
necessarily show that. The comments don't necessarily show that when it comes down to this article. But go ahead, Nat.
I might as
yeah,
well read it.
right. No, sure. I mean, I think that part is important because I think that a lot of times, if you're too emotional, whether you're a woman or a man, you're making a decision based on emotion. It's probably an impulsive decision. So you're not really thinking about what's going to happen after the fact or what the outcome is going to be. Right now, if you take a woman, let's take mom. So you have mom and son, and this is where I think Frank was getting into the whole thing about the privilege, right? Women,
Mm.
and I think do have a certain privilege that men don't have, right? As a boy, when he is raised by his mom, and if she is a woman that exudes all this emotional shit, and he sees that, especially let's just say, and sometimes I've been guilty of it, right? I've been guilty of it at like I don't know, at certain times, right? Like when I want to get something for a cheaper price, right? Maybe I'm more emotional because I know that will work for me. I know that I'm a woman and I can use that to my advantage, right? I don't have 50K for this car, but maybe if I flirt with a guy, he may give it to me for a little cheaper. But if you have a boy looking at his mother, saying, "Oh, that worked for her," maybe if I find a way to kind of do this thing, I can kind of work this system too. The issue is that you can work that system, but you can't do it the same way I do. And I think that's where the conflict is. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think that that's where the disconnect is that the mom is showing her son that she has this certain privilege. He's not seeing that it's not in his favor either. Why? Because there is no man around for him to actually see. Look, this shit don't work for us. This works for them. We have to actually go about this a different way. So,
Kids,
and I,
kids,
so that, yeah.
kids do not, and I don't mean to cut you off, but kids do not understand context of action until they get older and
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah.
are in situations where they are quickly shown, oh, this action doesn't work for me. You know?
I think I also think it depends on the emotional maturity of the single mom. If she's not honest with herself and allow that young man to be in spaces with other men, even though knowing that the father's not home, if she doesn't allow for him to be in spaces of other men to see how other men navigate emotionally, then that is going to be an issue. I've seen it, and
Yeah.
I'm living it because I allow my son to be in spaces with other men, and he also is cognizant of, let me find the male that I can identify myself with at the school. He always finds one man at the school that he really identifies with, and that is his person throughout his years at each school. I can name every last one of them.
Okay.
He gets a personal relationship, and that's something that I was open and honest with him about.
Mm. Okay.
I can't give you everything. Your dad's not present to give you everything, but it's okay to have a mentor, have someone that you can mimic. And I also, being honest, the epigenetics of the men in my family, I did not want him to go to them
Oh,
because
I'm sorry.
some of the things that we're talking about, teaching boys to be emotional, a lot of the women in my family were not honest about their sons not being able to handle their emotions.
Okay. Well, okay. Question. Question. Do you honestly believe that is all the men in your family have been set on a path to not understand how to control their emotions as men?
Yes.
Wait, say that again. I'm sorry. What was the
Oh,
question?
okay.
I'm saying it yes because a lot of the men in my family do not learn until after the situation has blown up in their face.
Okay.
It's not until after. It's not until, just like we just talked about, the long term effects of things. They make the decision and they have to deal with the consequences of that in the long term because they didn't think about it in the short term.
Oh,
So I've been able to recognize I don't think this is a good idea.
okay.
I don't.
And I
But
mean,
one thing I can say is with him being able to recognize different men within his life, he understands what to get from each person.
okay, okay. Being able to
He
differentiate.
understands what each person has with value within his life, and he understands what to take and what not to take.
Oh,
And we're open with each other and have a conversation about it to understand, okay, I know you don't understand this, mommy, but I think that I like this idea. I'm gonna talk to this person about it. I'm gonna talk to that person about it, so that way I can understand what's the best decision for me. And it's been working for him. It's been working for me. But I do think that I have to allow him to be a young man. And that's another thing that a lot of single moms we don't understand how to allow that young man at some point to grow up to be a man, because I got tired of being in college admissions and watching young men look at their mother when they don't know their social security number. It's just like, what's your
oh,
social security, what's this?
okay. I, all right.
The
Okay.
mama is answering for the child, and that's something that I think this is definitely true.
Now, now,
Allow them to walk in the space of a young man so they can grow up to be young men.
okay. Now, I,
What you know what I think that also goes with what we were talking about the age dynamic. You have some boys who are growing up with their mothers. If you're a 16, 17-year-old girl, you don't know how to be a mother, right? So you're pregnant with this child. That child is growing up with you. I mean, honestly. Now, if you're learning things as you go. But here's the thing: from what I've seen, I think that it's still gonna always be some level of growing, even if you think you're ready, right? Even if you're
yeah.
35, 36, and you've never had a child, I don't think anyone should go into it with I'm totally ready for everything that's gonna happen
No,
because you're not gonna be,
that's
right? You
not.
see what I'm saying?
A lot of people, shouldn't do that. You're gonna have a good amount that are gonna do it because they, believe that, oh,
Yeah.
I have everything, all the knowledge that I possibly can, have, and that's not true. That's just a, baseline. That should be a baseline, understanding of, you know, knowing that you don't know it all. However, Nat, the question I ended up asking AJ was, um, does she believe that all of the men, within her family, has a baseline of being emotional to the point where she believes that her son should not be going to him, going to them, whoever they are, going to them, for, certain things or for anything. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh, okay,
so that was a question,
okay.
where my thing is, and I'll put it in this perspective. This is what is popping in my head. Even though you may not believe there is a good representative that will not show your son a overly emotional state as a man within your family, I believe still interactions with certain men that are at varying levels still needs to happen because that son needs to also understand the men in his family.
And he has gotten that ability to figure out what he can take and what he can't take from each male in the family. So it's a under we have an understanding, and he has an understanding from watching and observing. He's very observant. I can give him
To it,
that.
yeah,
He is going to observe you and read you down
yeah, yeah.
and understand what he can get from me, what he can't. So he there is an understanding of what each male in the family presents in the family. But I do think emotions and how to deal with it is not something I think that they're ready to have, because that conversation has not happened in my family at all. I think I was the first one to say, "Hey, let's go to therapy and recondition our
Mental
mind on
health.
certain things."
Yeah, that.
And I think genetically a lot of the problems started with them because of poverty and because of the crack epidemic. It's like we just skirted past that that era. It's like we're here with these group of people, adults, that usually the older sibling had to raise the younger siblings, or there's no parents involved because the grandmother had to raise them. Grandmother's probably already gone, and you have a group of young people, millennials, Gen X's, trying to rebuild pieces, and some of the boomers don't want to admit that some mistakes and some situations were made. So now you have millennials and Gen Xers trying to fix things, but they don't want to be honest because the elders are not being
I
honest.
mean, and I'll put it in this perspective. There was multiple conversations that I've, had with my own mother, letting her know about things that I knew that would upset her. But the benefit in which we needed to move forward as far as being healthy in mind as a people is more important than individual anecdotal feelings about what you think should still be happening. To give an example, the whole aspect of, well, I call it, the I brought you in this world, I'll take you out mentality, where even you have boomers that believe when you talk to them about wanting to know what traumatized them, they take that as disrespect, even though you're not using any profanity. You're using big words, probably in some cases, some of the big words that you use, and they have no clue what they are. And you are in the intent to not disrespect them. You have the intent to not disrespect them. And they still believe because you are even bringing up the conversation, it's automatic disrespect. That's not true. Boomers, you have brought in generations that now understand the value of mental health and how it needs to be a conversation within the black community, let alone individual black families. Because over time, like I put it in this perspective. There was no specific reform plan when slavery ended, let alone we had to go through other crap when it came down to legislation that was written, you know, governmental actual organizations that was written to continue the pathology of oppression over time after the Emancipation Proclamation. So, with that happening, it was just a continuation of trauma over time that there was no reform plan, no specific reform plan in reference to, okay, we need to have, mental health as a factor here as far as, black people in the United States being able to understand, certain things that they believe are normal are not normal. And they need to get away from that and thinking that way and think this way. That didn't happen. So what is normalized is like, well, this is what we always been doing. Doesn't necessarily mean it's right. doesn't necessarily mean it's healthy that we just continue to be. It's not healthy, and this is just one example. It's not healthy for black families in the States to believe they only need to, when it comes down to marriage, only need to think about marriage in the scope of the individuals that are being married. It is healthy for black families to understand marriage in a family is about family, togetherness, coming together as family, two families coming together, being able to establish a bigger family, being able to understand the establishment of that. So you're teaching the younger generations the concept of collectivism.
Yep.
I would even go as far as saying not only collectivism, but establishing certain levels of nepotism so we're able to continue on within this lifetime as far as bringing more of us in. But often that doesn't happen because of all the traumas that are ignored on varying levels, especially the boomer level or generation.
And I think collectivism has happened in the black community,
Okay.
but again, trauma comes in and destroys it. When you think about the Tulsa race massacre, all the massacres that have happened in this country, our elders started. They
Mm-hmm.
started trying to build that structure, started trying to build that narrative of us being united, building our village again, basically. I grew up luckily in something sort of a village in the Gullah Geechee community. We have
Okay.
we have our stuff. We have our own. And I
Mm-hmm.
think what happened is the need to bring everyone in and to share the culture with everyone
Mm-hmm.
is now becoming to our detriment. There are things that are happening or taking place where we're not able to keep our families together because the culture is starting to wither away because of not having the conversations, not having the conversations, or the elders not wanting to be honest about certain things. And I think in the black community we have to be honest about here's what happened, here's how here's what happened, that uncle that was touching the little girls and we just tell him to stay downstairs in the basement. Here's what happened with him. Here's that uncle that have all the young boys coming to the house to drink and smoke. Here's that aunt that's over here touching the young. Like, they don't want to have those conversations. They don't want to have a plan of action of what we're going to do about that person. What are we going to do?
Oh,
And I think
Yeah.
that's where the breakdown, we're trying to heal, but we don't want to have the conversation about the healing and where it needs to come from.
at one point in time,
It's funny.
at one point in time, and I'm just say this and give it to you, Nat. At one point in time, when it came down to sexual deviancy or pedophilic uh, things, within a black community, or if I would even go as far as saying the African community, people were murdered for doing certain shit. Like, uh, you did what? Let's go ahead and take you over here in the bushes. You know what I'm saying? Like, though
Mhm.
those things were happening back then, but then there were certain things culturally that we adopted that continues on till this day in reinforcing the aspect of trauma, but now we just say it's a lifestyle choice, or an orientation that someone has oriented themselves in. And now that's also another dynamic that a lot of people don't really want to talk about in reference to lifestyles that they are living based on trauma that they have experienced.
Ooh, that's a whole nother podcast for a whole nother day.
I'm
Because
just saying, but I'm putting it out there because it's a genuine conversation to be had. But we won't talk about it because, I mean, there are various reasons why we won't talk about that. Nevertheless, what I'm getting at is the details in which trauma in often, more often than not, in a single parented home can be nurtured over time because of the breakup of the parents, no really establishment of, you know, discipline happening,
Accommodation.
boundaries being created, you know, and the understanding of not only creating the boundaries but also conveying the why and the purpose behind the creation of those boundaries, you know, and also understanding details in reference to the creation of, if you do go through certain things, the creation of certain coping mechanisms, being able to understand and establish coping skills in reference to how to deal with something that does bother you or could potentially traumatize you. So you're not self identifying with the trauma, you are now a survivor of it. Going into the
And I
next
think,
example,
yeah, I think
not
you talked about that already too. Boundaries.
not 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 teaching their sons coping skills. Okay, not teaching their sons coping skills. Boys who
No,
grow
no,
up in
no.
a
It's not teaching their sons
Understanding what boundaries
what
are.
boundaries are.
oh, okay, because we did talk
He's
about
skipping it.
boundaries. I was like, okay, did we skip it? You know what I'm saying? I mean, we can go ahead.
Oh, we can
We
skip it if you want
we
to. I mean, I don't.
Because I think when we talked about the inconsistencies of discipline in between structure and boundaries and
right.
how that kind of,
I
yeah,
mean,
we
let,
talked
let's
about
let's
it.
go let's go back because I don't want us to skip. You know what I'm saying? I thought we were skipping when we were talking about boundaries, but it's okay. Let's
I
go
think we're
ahead.
just kind of.
Go into not teaching their sons what boundaries are. Some single mothers just don't understand what structure is like men do. And part of the healthy establishment of structure is establishing boundaries. Boundaries are imaginary lines in the sand that keep boys safe. They keep boys from going too far and doing things that will hurt them. And a strong father teaches their sons what boundaries are at an early age. Boys who grow up without boundaries cross lines, they take dangerous, unnecessary risks, they don't know when they've gone too far, they violate people's personal space, and they can't take no for an answer. This leads to people having to do things like take out restraining orders, have them arrested, beat them severely, or even kill them to make them stop whatever they're doing.
This doesn't have anything to do with teaching their sons. This is parents teaching their children because anybody can be doing this.
That's what I was gonna say. I was
Fair,
gonna say. I was like, this
fair,
applies to kids in general.
fair. However, if you have a mother, you know, just talking about the particular example here, or the based on the article itself, you have a mother who doesn't even understand boundaries herself. In addition to the father is not present in that child's life for whatever reason. It could be the reason of the father, you know what I'm saying, is cracked out, or the father is being kept away from the son because the father doesn't meet the specific needs or wants of the mother that was needed during the time they were in the courting stage. That obviously didn't lead to marriage. Okay, and that's also another thing I wanted to talk about when it comes down to courting. But because it's not something that's really done anymore or we label it differently. Nevertheless, you have a situation like that where, okay, boundaries are not being taught, or the mother doesn't understand what boundaries are because she has no boundaries in her getting what she knows she deserves, which breeds a sense of entitlement.
I was gonna say that's entitlement.
You know what I'm saying? So now there is a situation where that young man, that son, is learning from their mother talking about the aspect of privilege, learning from their mother that boundaries don't matter. So that son may see certain things that the mother does, and the son is carrying out the same actions, but in the version of the son carrying out those actions. And now it becomes, well, I just do what I want. That's what is in the son's mind. And let's just say, add the splash on sexual deviancy, put that in there, and now maybe the son has a mindset of, well, I can do anything I want sexually. Mom is
I
doing,
think, I think toxic masculinity has already given them that.
well, mom is doing what she wants sexually because mom has multiple boyfriends in and out of the house. So why can't I do what I want? In addition to seeing various examples of other men that mom has been with doing what they want to moms. So, just using the example, so I'm gonna just do what I want. Not saying, and let me put this out there for all the people in the comment section. I am not saying that women only are the ones that are grooming sons to actually have a deviant sexual behavior within their mindset. That's not what I'm saying. I am just
Mhm.
using one specific example of how a son could be groomed in reference to believing that any sexual behavior it's okay because their mom has not created a boundary for them, nor is she an example of a boundary. She's not showing that. In addition to that, son probably is not learning it from a man because mom probably is in a mindset of wanting to keep that son away from men because maybe she has a little bit of misandristic thoughts in her mind in reference to how she sees men, but she doesn't necessarily say that. It just shows in her actions in not being around men or being around men in a certain way.
Child, that must be my child because I don't be around me. But, so, all jokes aside, not teaching your son what boundaries are. In a dating aspect, I think that's either parent. That's either parent. That could happen with either parent,
Fair.
regardless if the mother's alive, the father's not, whoever. That could happen with any parent. And again, this is about being honest with ourselves.
True.
That parent has to learn to be honest with themselves. I think, as far as on my experience being that parent, I had to be honest with myself and not date within the realm of my hurt. A lot of single mothers date within their hurt and in their pain, so that it creates a revolving door of let me feel. There's this saying in the hood economics of the world. When one man, what gets you over a heartbreak is to have another man. Let that one man walk out the door and let another one come in. And that's how the hood dynamics of relationship works. But if you be honest with yourself, why is that people do that? Because a lot of people don't want to be alone. That that narrative of being over 30, unmarried, single mom is a hard narrative to think about as a woman. But once you make peace with it and understand and not have that, I gotta have a man, I gotta have a man, then you'll start giving the right representatives and right people around your children. And then you'll also be comfortable with not being so hard up on having a man. And I think that's where a lot of the lack of boundaries come from, because a lot of women are trying to replace that father so desperately. They're trying to put a representative there so desperately. And once they become honest with themselves and say, hey, maybe I need to work on me maybe I need to find what's in me that wants a man so bad so I can have the right thing going on, the right representation for my children.
Let
And I
me
think that's where a lot of the hurt comes from.
let me
Is that narrative of, oh, you gonna be over 35? Don't nobody want you, according to Kevin Samuels.
let me say something that might come across as harsh. Could we say, and thinking about it, could we say the concept of dating is practicing divorce? Think about it real quick.
Elaborate that for
The
me and my
concept,
Could we
I
say
don't know
the
if I
elaborate
say the
that.
concept
concept.
of dating is practicing divorce? Let me kind of break open y'all amygdalas real quick. So, because if you think about it, dating, you end up going on a date with someone, see how things roll, how things, are happening, is the chemistry there, what may have you right. And then all of a sudden, let's just say y'all want to have another date or another date. Y'all think things are going well, and then it'll be that one particular thing that all of a sudden you like, I can't stand this dude or I can't stand this chick, you know. And then all of a sudden you don't want to be with them or date them anymore because obviously it's really not going to work, or there is a definite end all be all that you definitely see that's just not going to work for you, and then you start over again. People can date for years and train themselves to only date. But what are you truly gaining from that if you don't have a creed in mind on what you need to look for in a marriage partner?
I heard someone say something similar. An older lady. This was like 20 years. She's now, I know she's no longer with us, but she was like 80 something years old. And that was
Okay,
like,
so she had a good amount of wisdom.
she said, she said, baby, I know it's going to be hard for you because I had two at the same time. And she's like, I know it's going to be hard for you. For one thing, I'm going to let you know, don't let them kids run over you. Then she said also, she said, I could see you by yourself raising them. But she said, when you start dating again, if you're not, date for long term. Figure out what you can deal with somebody in the long run. You can't deal with them picking their nose. Don't get in a long term relationship and marry them. You can't, whatever you can deal with in the long run is what you can marry. But don't you date nobody that you can't deal with their stuff in the long run.
Let me ask, or put something else out there. How often are young women, let's say early 20s, how often do they enter their 20s equipped with actually having a mindset and being groomed and trained into looking for a husband compared to just wanting to use their 20s for fun?
Not often. This generation is now. Oh, this generation, they gonna tell you they FRE. They gonna tell you they not dating. They not looking for no marriage. The before us, Disney groomed us to look for marriage. Disney groomed us to want to be a bride. Disney just groomed us to be happy for being in a house and a home with a husband. And that's it. And I think that is what is causing so much virtue within the community of, I want to be married, I want to be married, but we're not being taught the right things. We're
Is
not being taught to keep our pure, be pure, and our only children we're supposed to have is with our husband. We're not being taught those things anymore. That's gone.
is would you say, both of y'all, would y'all say that primarily baseline level, and I'm gonna take it a step further, primarily baseline level, most black women, most, not all, because some but not all, most black women are taught, starting at a young age, to be independent compared to looking for a husband.
I don't think we were taught. I think we just end up. being in that position. I think I know where you're getting from because I think I've seen this before where white women were taught to go to college to find a man, black women were taught to go to college and finish that degree.
I'm not necessarily bringing white women in this, but what I will
No,
say,
that's a saying that I've heard.
okay,
I've heard that type of saying, but I think no, we're not taught. I don't think we're taught to be independent. I think we were the hyper independence comes from the amount of disappointment that we face as black women, and I think that's where that comes from.
from
I
who?
think I was taught
From,
to emotionally depend on myself.
okay, from the disappointment from who as a baseline? Who specifically? Is it black men?
I think it's parents. It starts at home. The disappointment starts at home.
But when we say for black
I
women,
think I would say, okay,
okay, go ahead, Nat. What you got?
I would say I would say that I don't believe that black women were taught also what AJ is saying, but I would say because out of, and this is just me from what I've seen and from what I've experienced, out of fear and out of the like unpredictability that, even if you meet a guy, it doesn't mean that he's gonna always meet you, right? Even if you marry this guy, there's a chance, or there may be some chance that he may wake up one day and say, if you have solely put all your eggs in that basket, it's like, what do you do from there? So I think out of fear, mothers do say, look, babe, go to college, go get your degree, meet the person you want to meet. You know, I'm going to pray it work out. But if it doesn't, you need to
Live,
make sure that you are uh,
living,
secure, right?
living.
So that's just one part of it. But there are some instances where I think that I just never think that we're taught to be independent. And then you have instances where they just kind of, like she said, end up like that, where by either by circumstance or by choice, whether they got pregnant, got left, whether they split up, whatever happened, and now she's kind of forced to be in that position where she has to do for her family, and there is no one there. Whether it was her fault, his fault, doesn't matter.
How often
Reality is that she's there by herself.
how often are we effectively groomed and taught how to be with the proper basket and how to see what a proper basket is and ask questions to know that the material of the basket is what it is and not what it tries to hide itself to be.
That does not have, this is where the disappointment comes from. When I said parents, the disappointment comes from parents, whether it's one or both. The disappointment starts with parents, and then that creates the narrative of, you know what, I got to do what I got to do for myself. I call it the fuck it I got it narrative, because ain't nobody else gonna get it but me, so I got it. But there
Survival.
also, I think from your perspective, when it comes to the dating, who taught us how to date? And to be honest, no one taught us how to date,
I
because
know
there
I
was
know
no
who
one
taught us. I know who taught us. Media, propaganda,
that.
things on TikTok and uh, Facebook, and you know what? I would go. Let me go and take it
But you
back.
know what they don't teach you? They don't teach you how to be single, and I think that that's something else that people don't talk about. It is almost
But they also don't
like,
teach you how to be in a committed relationship.
I think
right. So that's what I'm saying. It's not that they don't.
I'm glad you
Okay,
said that, Matt. I'm glad
because
you
They
said
they
don't.
that.
They
don't
do
teach you
not.
how to be
They do
satisfied,
not.
or to be single with purpose, or to date with purpose,
With
or to
per
get married with purpose. They don't teach you that.
main
That's
point.
not taught.
That's the main point I
You
was
know
trying
what I
to get to.
mean?
The
I'm sorry.
pandemic,
Go ahead, Frank. I had to get
the pandemic opened that door up to where people had to live with themselves,
They had to
whether it was
self-reflect,
that.
and be like, I ain't got
family.
nobody beside me. Who gonna help me get this water out the well?
When I tell y'all,
Get your ass up. Go get that one out the way.
you if you never learned to live by yourself in that 2 years of the pandemic, you felt it. Cause I had so many exes come out the woodworks. It's like, hey, I miss you. No, you don't want to be
You
alone,
all you
player.
know. Come on, let's be real about this. All they wanted to do is pass some legislation when it came down to tilapia and kielbasa politics that they were trying to do. Okay, you understand what I mean? You understand what I say when I say tilapia and kielbasa? You know what I'm saying? Taking the kielbasa and being able to fillet the tilapia. Let me not. All right.
We
All
got
I'm
it.
saying is,
You got it.
okay. All I'm saying is that's all they would. Look, if somebody come and just hit you up out of the blue, especially if you have not talked to them in years. In addition to whatever y'all established back then, was more of a fling. Was more of a fling. You know what I'm saying? Because I think we baseline understand what a fling is compared to you had something of substance with said individual. And
And
substance,
this is all the topics. Not teaching your sons what boundaries are, not teaching their sons coping skills, establishing a codependent relationship.
Yeah.
I feel like this is the men and the women having these issues, not knowing boundaries, not having coping skills, and having codependent relationships. Women
Codependency is
got
something too.
codependent
Issue. That's a
relationships
huge
in the
one right
community
there, on both
all the time.
sides.
all right.
That's just a big.
Since we want to take it there, I'm gonna take it there because I based on the article itself, I was gearing it in the direction of okay, this is an examination of our single parents that are mothers. This is an examination of what they are doing. However, okay, yes, baseline, yeah, men and women, men and women have issues. But are we coming together to talk about the issues in reference to us not being able to understand the reality of growing relationships and understanding what you need to be at when it comes down to level, mindset, character, and status in life? Okay? Mindset, character, and status in life, what level you need to be at as far as having a start point for establishing a union with someone. Union. I don't give a
No,
fuck if you say relationship. I don't give a fuck if you say marriage.
no,
A union with someone. You know?
they don't. I don't think that I'm a true person of definition. And I say that because
Yeah.
if you can define, if
Define.
somebody knows what that shit is, then they'll know how to proceed, right? And I deal with this at work all the time where somebody will say, well, these people are, with the staff, should do this. Well, do they know that? Are you assuming they know that? Have you defined what the fuck that is? And if they can't answer those questions, I say go back, send out the communication, define it. They don't assume that they know. And I'd apply that to this too. You have, I mean, and I wouldn't even say that people just don't know. Like, they know, or maybe some of them don't know.
People,
I just
some
feel
people
like,
don't know. Some people don't know.
I'm
yeah,
gonna put this,
yeah,
I'm gonna just put
that is
this
true.
I'm gonna just put this out there. By larger mass, more so when it comes down to women, you have, because women outnumber men, I would say more or less between 5 to 7 to 1. Okay, more often than not, you have a lot of women that are dying alone. That's not talked about. You know, that's not talked about. Now we're highlighting one particular factor in which a woman will be pushed out of the dating market because of the fact that she has children with a man that may have a sketchy past. Like one of the things that I brought up episodes ago before, when it came down to one time, or because I've done it few times prior to me getting married. But one particular time, I was in a situation where I was dating a woman with a child. The child was in his teens, where that whole dynamic, I understood what I was getting to was stepping into it. You know, I wanted to go further with this woman. Now, her mindset on the intent in why she was with me was different. I didn't disclose that, or she didn't disclose that until later on down the line. Where she's not necessarily wanting to be with me because she wants to be with me and establish, a union together. She wants to be with me because the only value she sees in me is sperm. That's also another thing that's not talked about. Nevertheless, getting to the detail in which me understanding, oh, child is package deal. I get it. I understand that. Like I was, Nat, you know the story. The detail in which me purchasing tickets for them, for her son to go and see his
Oh,
biological father.
yeah.
And me getting in contact with the biological father on my own because I understand the value of a son knowing his dad. I don't give a fuck. Let me re say that. Say it again. I do not give a fuck about what all happened when it came down to the relationship that you had with that man. That's not what I'm doing this for. It's purely for the son. You may you may not be able to get along with him. Maybe the son actually needs to know that. There are certain things that may have happened in reference to y'all not being able to continue to be together when you got pregnant. Maybe the son actually needs to know that so he can see the example so he doesn't mimic it or do it in the future on certain things that he may mimic that his dad did that he doesn't know he's doing because probably it's within him epigenetically.
Can I just say something real quick while you right there?
All right, what's up?
Um,
What's up?
this takes me back to boundaries, and let me kind of explain why I say this. If you think about it, while your intent was good, right? So while your intent was what it was, if you look at it from her standpoint, and I don't even know her. I mean, I just knew of
Yeah,
her.
yeah,
I met her, but I don't
yeah,
know
yeah.
her. Or from a mom standpoint, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. And AJ, you can chime in if you want to here. But if I was a parent, right? So if I was a mom, I had, I was seeing someone or I was dating someone, or if I was in a relationship with someone, I had a son. He wanted to let this son meet his biological father. Okay, fine. It may have been a decision that she wanted to make on her own, right? Versus someone else coming in and saying that. You see kind of what I'm getting at
I get what you're
here.
saying.
And I think that
I get what
that's
you're saying.
why,
Yeah.
right. So I think that that's why she may have felt, or a mom may feel like, while I understand what he's doing here, while I may even think that it's a good decision, I feel like he is overstepping his boundaries, right?
Okay,
Just
fair.
hear me out. Just hear me out, right? So that may be, and if you think about it, we already talked about what the son sees from what his mother does, right? If he sees his mother saying no to this man that's coming to the family, show a good example of what a man is, and what a man's character should be, blah, 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 blah. But then she sees him say, no, wait, we're not going to do that because I feel like you're overstepping your boundary. You have nothing to do with his father. You see what I'm saying? Um, so that may have, that I can see how that could cause conflict, right?
Fair. Okay, what you got?
I can see how that
I got
could cause
other
conflict.
context based on the story, but go ahead, AJ. What you got?
So I
Okay.
have a perspective for being that mother.
Okay, what's up?
There are things that happens in a mother and father dynamics that a lot of people that date the parents don't understand. I think I was very understanding of he needs to be present, and I tried, but whenever I got into a dating aspect with someone, that was always the first question. Where is they dad? How, what's the relationship like? What do I need to be, what do I need to be aware of? And there was one guy that was really, really active. We dated for almost 3.5 years, and he felt like the same way you felt. They need to be open communication with each other. But for my safety, because this relationship was not healthy for me,
Okay.
physically and emotionally, it was not healthy. And I know I know the father's character. I know how he is.
Hmm.
I still continue to try to do that, but I ended up damaging the father son relationship because I know what kind of person he is.
Hmm.
For example, to get on the phone and ask a 5-year old when they coming to see you, knowing that the conversation did not happen between you and the mother yet. And the 5-year old is looking at the mother like, okay, when are we coming?
Okay. Okay. Definitely, I get that. I get that. I totally
A
understand that.
lot of times, a lot of fathers play their absences up a little higher, as in, if she's keeping me, but why? What have you done in that relationship dynamics for her to want to emotionally protect that child or physically protect that child from you? I did not understand this as a child with that other dynamic until I had the same dynamics as my mother. I still have a good relationship with my dad, but I understand why. Because a lot of the absences are not being spoken of to why are you not here? What have you done? There are some men that have been beating the mother's ass.
Fair. Yeah. Yeah.
If they're not beating, they're emotionally manipulating the relationship. The mother might have moved on into something else, but they're trying to be respectful and keep a relationship there, but things like that happens. Oh, well, when I'm gonna come see y'all, when you will come see me, or I sent such and such, and you're like, I didn't, you didn't, we didn't have a conversation about that. This goes back to not just the parental of the child, the parental of the parents is the conversation that we're really not having. A lot of the parents have parental issues, so it just becomes the epigenetics of we keep going into the same cycle. We need to be honest of why that absence is there.
No.
Why is that father not present?
Let me.
Why is that mother not present?
Let me.
I have seen the women in the same situation as of an absent father, and I was completely shocked that women are now taking that role. You
Yeah.
wanted to have a baby by me to control me, so you keep the baby.
Yeah,
Okay.
that happens too. And I disclosure. It could have happened to me, but
Oh.
luckily it didn't.
I was about to say, you got some babies out there?
No,
You don't
I'll
tell
put
me.
it in this perspective because the fact that said person did not want to take care of themselves, they had two miscarriages. Now there's more context on that, you know. However, it didn't happen, and luckily it didn't, because the only value that that person saw in me was sperm.
I'm glad you said that too, because it's another conversation I think women need to be honest with themselves about. If you are having a hard time with that one child or that two children, do not have any more.
Okay,
But
that's a whole nother
that's
podcast.
a whole we
That's
look.
a whole
Because
nother.
that you creating the same cycle over and over and over and over.
I ain't
You
touching that with a 10 foot pole. We already had another episode about Roe versus Wade. Um, all I'm saying is, it look. So I'll put this perspective on it. Of course, the article is one sided. I believe the need for the creation of the article is great because oftentimes this is not talked about from the perspective of holding women who are single mothers accountable for toxic behavior that they exude in reference to raising their sons. Okay?
what's one part I think we need to talk about? Smothering. We need to talk about this now.
I mean, we
We need,
already we already kind of just been talking. Do we want to kind of skip certain things and go to smothering real quick?
I
Yeah,
think
it could. I think that some of this article, like the author or the writer of the article, a lot of it is not redundant, but he could have or she could have kind of merged like some of these under
yeah.
like few bullets because
I
some
mean,
of it
yeah,
is
yeah.
kind of
Let's
applied
let's
to
just
others.
let's
But
just
smothering is, smothering is.
Smothering is a conversation that I had to have with myself.
okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and read smothering. I'm gonna go ahead and read smothering real quick. So smothering,
Oh my gosh!
smothering
Don't
some
be a
I
smothered
had to
mother.
I
smothering
had to have that conversation with
Smothered
myself.
mother.
smothering something that prevents a boy from growing up to become a healthy, emotionally stable, functional man. When a woman smothers her son, it's the equivalent of putting a boot on a boy's neck and never letting him get up. It paralyzes him and prevents him from moving forward in life. Many single mothers often kill their boys by choking the very life out of them with their constant nagging and hovering over them. When a mother holds a child too close to them, it prevents them from going out into the world and experiencing life. When they try to dictate the terms of a boy's manhood, all it leads to is him growing up dependent on women for his existence.
Not the way this article is putting it. that's not, that's
Okay,
not my
okay.
way,
You
but
want to preface that?
I,
Okay, all right, go ahead, go ahead.
I had to be honest and say, okay, AJ, you are smothering this poor 14-year-old boy. You got to let him go. You got to let him go. And I said this earlier about allowing the young man to walk into his manhood. And I think a part of that we don't understand, even parents at all,
Mm-hmm.
is allowing them to accept, put boundaries in place. We've talked about that, but I had to be honest with myself. I was afraid that that fear that black women get when young men start to become men in this world. I was either afraid that he was going to get killed by somebody in his peer set, or
Willie Lynch.
he was going to get hurt by the police for having, moving too fast, too sudden. I think it is, I think it's psychologically conditioned in a black mother's mind where we start, okay, my boy is not a boy anymore. He's not going to be seen as a little boy anymore. When my son started growing his mustache, I was like, oh my God. Prime example was this past week, this past weekend. He got paid and wanted to go to the mall. So I said, okay, go ahead. Go to I'm gonna let you go to the mall with your friends. And went to the mall. I called him and said, hey, where are you at? It's 6:30. He says, I'm on the way. And I said, okay. So got dark outside and I was like, wait a minute. This is 6:30. So 8:30 I'm like, it don't take that long to get where he was at. So I started calling people, started trying to figure out where he's at. Called my male best friend. I was like, hey, I can't find him. He was like, what do you mean you can't find him? I said, he's not 5, he's 14. I can't find him. So the phone died. Last location he was at, all the way on the other side of town. That was when he said he was on his way. So immediately I started panicking. I was in the car ready on go to go look for my child. I'm on the phone with all these other people, call the friends, call all these people. As soon as I got in the car, he comes walking down the hill, gets to my window and goes, I know, I know. I said I was on the way. The phone died, the train was delayed. I didn't know what else to do. I know. And it was at that moment I said, you gotta let go, baby. You gotta let that child go. You, you gotta let him go. And trust that you made the right decision as a parent in raising him and he's gonna do the right thing. And I think that's where stuff like this article makes you question, am I doing the right thing? Did I give him the right tools? Does he know what to do? When he came home and came to the car, he knew. He was like, I know. I know. And I said, okay, I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing the right thing by him because he knew exactly how I was emotionally, like completely losing it.
Can I say something? Can I say something real quick? Well, two things. First thing, the article, it being one-sided, it gives the proper push for women who are single mothers to do the critical thinking necessary and push them to have that cognitive dissonance to make sure they are doing the right thing by their son. And I'm gonna just say this, and I'm gonna say this, but I'm not saying this because I'm trying to push something onto you, AJ, or saying that this is what you should be doing or you should be gaining this particular type of man. However, maybe the presence of a man within his absolutism when it comes down to true masculinity in reference to being able to quell your anxiety as far as your son maybe is needed, but then again, that's not up for me to say. And when I say true
I
masculinity, hold on that real quick. When I say true masculinity, I'm talking about the understanding of the balance of both energies when it comes down to his true masculinity that is meshed well with your true femininity. Maybe. But that's what I want to say. Nat, what you got to say?
I was gonna say that what I think you were doing was just wearing him. That's what I think you were doing. I don't know if that was smothering. You feel what I'm saying? But what I think is because he was a boy, if you were like for example, if you one thing I learned from my mother is that she did not do that, right? So she did not smother. she she did not, and that's one. And I can't say my mother didn't do a lot of good things, but some things she did. Some things she did very well. And what I liked about her growing up is that if she said, "Look, AJ, you can go to the mall, be back by 6:30, right?" Trust and believe she's not sitting around waiting to be back by 6:30. It's an expectation, right, that she set. You be back by 6:30. If you're back by 6:30, it's fine. If you're not back by 6:30, I don't ever remember her trying to figure out where you were, because in her mind, you're gonna be back. When you came back, if you came back at like 7, 8 o'clock, you dealt with the consequences. That's all. So there were consequences in place, but there was no, hey, where are you? I told you to be back by 6:30. What you doing, right? Then if you weren't back by 6:30, then you got whatever she had to say or whatever the consequences was. But what I was gonna say is that I just think that you were worried about him. But smothering is like is what I think is kind of
Before.
like this. I was talking to somebody, and I don't remember who I was talking to, but they were saying that he used to coach little league football or something like that, right? For these
Hmm.
kids. He said he stopped coaching, and he said he stopped coaching it mainly because of the parents. He said the mom, he said
Makes sense.
matter of fact, he said specifically for the single mothers. He said he could always tell. He could always tell his parents. I mean, his boys had single mothers because they would be at every game. Yeah, every game. They would be at every rehearsal, and he could not even tell them or give them, like instruction without them getting into it about why he can't give their child instruction. He gave me an example. He said, if I could tell the child to go this way or don't run that way, and the mother is just saying, don't tell my child don't do that. It's like, well, I'm telling him don't run that way because he can get hit.
I'm
You
glad
know
you
what I
said
mean?
a coach did that because I had a coach. My son was playing basketball one year, and the coach was like, he was yelling. He was like, shoot the ball, shoot the ball. I get up from the bleachers and was like, shoot the ball.
But that's
The
what he
coach turned
said. He said that. He said, I don't do it no more. He
the
said, because
coach,
they don't know how to let
the
their
coach
kids
turned around
be,
and was
you
like,
know.
your boy gonna be okay. He gonna be all right.
Okay, so you know what? Let me just put this out there. I have a back and forth understanding on using the term uh, toxic masculinity. I don't think the term toxic masculinity it's confusing to me because if it was true masculinity, then it wouldn't be masculinity at all. Or if it was toxic, it wouldn't be masculinity at all. Let me correct that.
Mhm. Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like one of the examples that I gave, I don't know if it was a while ago or maybe it was in the last episode, but um, when it comes down to the balance of the man and the woman, okay, the balance of the man and the woman, I preface the 60-40 rule, okay, 60-40 rule, and let me go ahead and say this again. So 60% of that man is exuding his true masculinity within what he knows is for the best interest of the environment that he's in. And the 40% is understanding baseline and growing upon his understanding of the true femininity that is within his woman to reinforce balance. And then for the woman, it's vice versa. So that's 60, understanding how her true femininity is for the environment, her understanding exuding it for the environment. And that 40 is understanding what she needs to understand when it comes down to understanding her man as far as the true masculinity he needs to exude. And that's how they balance each other out when it comes down to the medium 20% that both need to be in understanding one another consistently. Okay?
Mhm.
The reason why I say that is because you're not going to get everything right. But the intent is to have balance as a whole. The intent is to be good in your actions. The intent is to have all parties understanding all parties because inevitably it's not all parties, it's just one party. That should be the intent. The intent is to not have any malicious thoughts or any selfish thoughts that goes against what the party needs to do when it comes down to teamwork.
Mhm.
That should be the intent.
But I think toxic masculinity comes from a white perspective as well. And let me bring that to the
I have
former president.
I have a take
The
on that, but
former
I
president.
want you to give your example, but I have a take on that also. Go ahead.
The former president of the United States.
Oh boy.
The perspective of that masculinity and what he felt about women.
That's not masculinity.
No, that form of that culture norm of masculinity and that perspective, their perspective of masculinity.
Yeah, that's not
Not our,
masculinity. But go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. It's just
not our
not.
masculinity.
It's not.
I mean his viewpoints on women and how he views women and how he degrades women. Just that point. I understand what you're saying, that that is not how masculinity is defined truly.
It's
But
not masculinity at all. That's what I'm saying. Like, it is
what
not even close to what masculinity is when it comes down to the true definition of it. I don't even place anything that man has done in the scope of what, what, like, grabbing women by the, like, that crap, that is just not at all whatsoever. And I'm sorry,
masculine?
I don't mean to cut you off, but I mean to cut you off, but I don't mean to cut you off, but I mean to cut you off. It is not at all masculine. Nothing that his actions shows true masculinity because the intent is to be selfish.
So how do we want to define masculinity outside of what society deems as masculine? Because what society deems as masculine is a culture based narrative and not an individual good intent
Well,
narrative.
first off, we need to make sure that we don't have other parties within other political ideologies having a mindset of adopting negative behavior, all negative behavior that men exude as masculinity. That's first thing. Me, i.e., talking about feminism. You know what I'm saying? Like feminism, the modern feminism specifically. I'll say modern feminism because when it came down to the first and second wave, I totally understand why they existed, but they ended up, back then having a need to gain numbers, especially from black women specifically, having a need to gain numbers from minorities, even though I don't even like using that term, in reference to pushing their agenda. But then when it comes down to most black women this day and age that will call themselves feminists, um, a lot of white women who are feminists don't give a fuck about you. They don't.
That is definitely true.
But also in turn, in reference to the creation of the definition, no true masculinity, no masculinity on earth exudes traits of selfishness.
That is definitely true. Even in the animal kingdom, there is no trace of selfishness when it comes to masculinity. Even there is even a healthy balance between femininity and masculinity between
Right.
the animal kingdom.
Exactly where
There's a healthy balance of partnership
talking about
between.
talking about balance, right?
Yeah, I would say.
The biggest idea is balance within collectivism, coming together, understanding the balance that is needed to continue families being healthy together, and selfishness is not a factor.
So my question to this, to the single parenting, how do we change the conversation to single mothers being, because I think this will answer a lot of the issues that I feel like a lot of women are coming across with it comes to dating.
Okay.
How is it that we can define the fact that some of us are dating with men that are walking in a selfish role of themselves? You see what I'm saying? They're not walking in masculinity. If we put it in your terms, a lot of men
Mm-hmm.
are not walking in masculinity, and a lot of women have to walk in that realm because we have no other choice.
But then you have a lot of women that honestly believe negative traits that they see from men that are not walking in masculinity is masculinity, when in actuality is just pseudo masculinity. Because a
So
woman,
maybe that's the conversation we need to have. What is masculinity? Defining it positively and not negatively, so women can recognize this is a masculine man. This is who you can sit back and be submissive with. This is your basket with the right eggs.
well, first off, we need to drop ideologies that really have never worked for us. And I'm going to take it back to the feminist movement. Okay. One of the ideologies that you have a lot of women this day and age believing is that they can have everything and not understand how to get specific things that are healthier for them. To give an example, um, using your 20s to just have fun. Oftentimes, using your 20s to just have fun, having fun in certain aspects places you at more risk to be allotted certain things that later on down the line would not allot you what you know you need in your life.
Well, maybe we need to redefine using your 20s to finding yourself.
I would say using your 20s to both find yourself and also find the partner that is absolute about building something with you. Both. Both.
I wouldn't even say this. I mean, the average person starts to date. I mean, between what, like 14 and 16, something like that. So between 14, a lot can happen between 14 and 16
Okay.
before you even reach your 20s. You see what I'm
Yes.
saying? So I think that that conversation should be had early.
No, I agree
And it's a
because if you
conversation
don't
that a lot of
groom,
parents just don't want to have. I mean, even the whole sex conversation, like how many, especially in the black household, how many black mothers are really sitting down having the
There.
birds and the bees talk,
I was
not using like this baby language, but
no, no,
using
no, no, no.
terms,
My mother
using
started
terms of
talking to
what
me
they are,
about,
you know.
and I'm gonna just put this language out there, or I'm gonna just say it the way I usually say it. My mother started talking to me about kielbasa's and tilapias at the age of 4.
I
I
had this
I
conversation.
I give you more context on the shit that I went through as a kid. My grandmother started reading the Bible to me at the age of 5. Give you more
Mm-hmm.
context, my mother started using a punishment system when it came down to saying, well, you're either going to write a 1 page report on the topic out of the encyclopedia or I'm going to give you an ass whooping. Guess how many reports did I get?
A bunch.
I mean, mine too. My mother talked to us, and I had an aunt who was a nurse, so she would actually take me and my cousin in the basement. We have class. It was like shit, like an easel. It
I
was
did not have
My
that
like
conversation.
we didn't have
godfather,
class.
my
But some
godfather,
parents nowadays are not having that talk. Same thing with like girls. Girls are
they
getting their
need to.
cycle now before their mother
It's
has
it's
even
it's a
told them,
must.
look,
They need
this
to.
could happen.
My
You know.
godfather used to sit me down before, because our thing was we always watch Food Network together because in my family the men love to cook. You know what I'm saying? And it wasn't no thing of, well, men need to cook because women will whoop de woo. No, it was a thing where my grandfather my grandfather was the best cook in the family. Even when he passed away, everybody knew this. And he passed down info on how to throw down in the kitchen. The women still threw down the kitchen, but we knew the young men, sorry, we knew the men in the family, it's just what the fuck it is. We got
I the
it.
conversation about sex around children did not happen for me. And I was really at a disadvantage. I
Understand.
really I had a very and this is how I became a teen mom because nobody had that conversation with me. Nobody taught me the respect of my body and where my body is a temple. Nobody had that conversation with me.
But
Now I remember when I was pregnant at 19 years old having this conversation with my mom and my nephew's mother. I told them, I said, when they get older, I'm having this conversation with them. I remember my grandfather was sitting there too. He was like, I don't know why you talking to them about that. And then I wasn't talking to them. I said, you need to have that conversation with them.
old school way of thinking, it doesn't help because my whole thing is when it comes down to having conversations like that, not only having the conversation when it comes down to the sanctity of your body, but also understanding how to give your body to someone who is absolute about progression and absolute about being there for you and understanding how to look for that shit. That too,
And
that
understanding how
also
your
needs to
body
be a
There
feels.
goes
conversation.
back to what I said earlier about young girls being with older men that know these young girls don't have not had that conversation.
it's more prominent because you have a lot of older men that end up preface it. A lot of older men oftentimes are in the mindset of what is considered to be the sexual marketplace in reference to looking for a woman who has more value in that specifically as far as being able to have children. However, the dynamic in which young women are not being taught certain things at a younger age in reference to establishing concrete unions and relationships. And more, this is also, guys too, because, the whole thing is, you go ahead, tap any tilapia you want to, when in actuality, all you're doing is training yourself to continually only see women just for what is between their pants. Or the biggest thing is, and this is one thing that does happen, men want to ensure paternity. They want to ensure it, but oftentimes they have not been taught how to in the scope of their own behavior. And that's also another thing when it comes down to other side of the game, as far as young men not being taught the right things in reference to how they need to look for a life partner. And I'm even go as far as saying this. Um, I know monogamy is not for everybody. I'm even talking about the ones on the poly side of the game too. Because I do believe we're not having as many babies, but also I will preface, I'm not going to tell a woman what to do with her body, not unless she's in danger. You know what I'm saying? Like, if it's legitimately, we already had that in Roe versus Wade conversation. My thing is, we as a whole are not being taught certain things at younger ages, so we are more privy to having more established foundations at younger ages because it is lucrative for us to be separate.
Yep, that is definitely true.
Guess
I
who
think
the Based on gender, guess who are the number one consumers on the face of the earth?
the number one consumers based on gender has to be women, black women.
It's women, definitely, but the aspect of how other things, when it comes down to things that tie back to us culturally, in reference to people delving into things that we think or they think is black culture, when in actuality it was just adopting things that became black culture because it was never really black culture in the first place. It was more
Hmm.
so put out there as far as something that people idolize and wanted from us. Now they buy into it because they, in every sense of the words, uh, they want to be us, but they don't want to be us. Like Paul Mooney says all the time, they want to be a nigga, but they don't want to be a nigga.
Black people walk like that because we have style, we got flavor, we got rhythm. I mean, the black man in America is the most copied man on this planet, bar none. Everybody want to be a nigga, but nobody want to be a nigga. How about that question?
I think that this conversation about the single parenting and
Okay.
it's opened my eyes to some conversations that I need to have with myself.
No, 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 no. I'm gonna say no,
I'm just
AJ.
glad that you not know her. That's fine.
I'm gonna say nah, no, 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 no. I get having it with yourself, but also we also need to have conversations like this with others of us, too. You know, it
But you know,
as a whole.
that is difficult to do because I've tried that. Oh God, I've tried that
Resiliency
because
resiliency builds adversity, and adversity opens the doors for conversations to be normalized.
yeah,
I'm not saying I have all the answers. What I am saying is I have a mindset of creating answers that is more so for the collective. And that's where we need to be.
Yeah, I think collectively we need to be honest. Like I said earlier, we need to be honest about where we're at in life when it comes to just ourselves in parenting, family dynamics, having these hard conversations,
And listening
reparenting.
to your kid, you know, listening to them too.
Yeah.
Yeah, reparenting our inner child at the same time as well.
I think that that comes with being that reflective to where you're able to objectively know what you're doing wrong and not beat yourself up for being at that place where you've done wrong, so you're able to now grow and do what is right.
And I think that's what we need to say in open spaces about single mothers and the fathers, not beating each other up about where we're at. Like we need to be, and I think a lot of people need to have that conversation when it comes to the parenting to begin with, not beating each other up. We need to, like we said that we agree that that article is kind of one sided, one perspective.
No, it is one sided and one perspective, but the one sided and one perspective often is not talked about in mass media because it is lucrative for single mothers in modern society to be single mothers. So it's not a thing that's often going to be talked about. Where the reason why I wanted us to get into this article. Here's one primary reason. Oftentimes in mass in the black community, mothers are shielded from having certain conversations that holds them accountable. But
Yeah.
oftentimes, and I will put it in this perspective. Oftentimes, we definitely hold men accountable for their fucked up behavior on certain things,
Yeah.
but we don't preface that with a balance of also holding black women accountable for messed up behavior too. Where the I'm gonna just say it, whatever. We've been placed, black people in the United States, when it comes down to the black community, have been placed in a forced matriarchy. It's been forced based on governmental intervention and based on our disdain for one another in various ways that goes back to imposed and infused self-hatred. And I say these things because yes, this platform, myself and Nat have created, it's a means to have those real conversations, that raw conversation where we do talk about things, but the intent is to not be malicious. The intent is to grow. Real raw, real raw exchange. That raw shit that we need to have. That's the intent. The intent is to have the raw conversation so we're able to grow collectively. And a lot of people don't want to have the conversations, but inevitably, sorry, fuck that. We are going to. We are going to. And you don't like it, just go ahead and put it in the comments. As a matter of fact, comment, like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We gotta get these likes up, people. You know what I'm saying? Y'all gotta understand delving into this content. Okay? Cool. I'm just saying. We gotta have these conversations. I know y'all like looking at 2.5, 3 hour podcast episodes. You know, I know y'all don't. We probably need to cut it down to 15 minutes apiece because you know people's attention spans be off the chain. I'm just saying. However, still, we need to have these conversations.
True indeed.
I'm just saying. It I cannot sit up here as a black man in this world and just be like, you know what, screw it. Everybody is just left to their own devices. Because, hey, the black community is not a monolith. So why the fuck do we should care? Because everybody is doing their own thing. That's so cake ass, weak ass bullshit.
I do want to say this when it comes to this perspective of the article. And if you are a man that is trying to date a woman, ask yourself these questions. Do I have those things in the article? Was this done to me? Do I do these things? And
I
if you do, please seek the help that you need.
I agree with both men and women reading the shit. I agree with both, especially black men and black women, because obviously it comes from African America.org, which obviously is a platform for black people.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like I agree with both black men and black women reading this, but reading it objectively. If you immediately be like, what the fuck they talking about? I know they're not talking about me. They must be. If you on some shit like we know you, you're a statistic.
Triggered.
You're triggered because you're a statistic. Oftentimes, like you up here trying to say, like, if we look at the comments, most of it is deflection. You know, it's well, this is done too, and I get it. I get us in this conversation talking about it's done too on the other side in reference to certain behaviors. However, it's a special case when it comes down to black women being single mothers compared to a special case when it comes down to black men being single fathers.
Yeah, we also need to have the conversation to our how come people. Because that older lady said to me too, don't you ever be a how come person. How come this person get this? How come white people do this? How come this? How come that? Until you get how come out your system, you'll never grow.
Also, I call it the them too mentality. Them too, like, so when you do that, when people do that, I'm putting it for the people out there. When y'all do that, all you're doing is deflecting from being able to do that level of self-reflection and self-correction, so you're not exuding toxic behaviors, both men and women, both. When y'all do that, because inevitably when you say them too, you're acknowledging to yourself that your toxic behavior is okay. Because when you say them too, it's a deflection from being able to do self-examination. If I'm fucked up and people tell me I'm fucked up and there are certain things I'm doing that's fucked up, I'm not going to continue to be like, well, they fucked up too. I'm fucked up. Okay, it's not bad. It's bad if I continue to do the same behavior over and over and over again. But it's not bad when now I'm doing the self-reflection to understand, yeah, okay, yeah, I was fucked up. Now I'm taking the steps to be able to grow and not do the fucked up behavior that I did previously. Because now other people that probably love and care about me are telling me, oh, this behavior is fucked up because A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, the whole goddamn alphabet, a list of whatever the fuck that I'm doing, the reasons why it's wrong, why it's not good.
Mhm.
All I'm saying is there's too much insulation, or sorry, too much insulation and too many echo chambers that don't put women in the seat of being held accountable. That's why you have too many women this day and age that it's very hard for them to be held accountable when they are exuding toxic behavior because they are not baseline by society examined that way. Not baseline.
Mhm.
They're kept from that. But
It's kind of like that saying where you have mothers. What is it? Mothers love their sons but raise their daughter.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you need to be raising a son too. And you need to
Yeah.
be loving both of them. Balance. All right, y'all want to cut it because we've been running for a long time.
Yeah. We can.
We okay. All right.
You can get it.
All right. So the last thing I'll say when it comes down to all of this is um if you in the comments and you going now try to deflect as far as saying, well, them two, all that crap, uh, you a sucker. And I said it. You don't like what I said? Go ahead, tell me in the comments, and then I'll tell you you're a sucker again. Okay? I love you, but I still will tell you a sucker, even though I love you. Ah! All right. Real Raw Exchange Podcast. Y'all take it easy. Have a wonderful week. Bye bye.